Hello, just a quick focus on some elements or one element of our risk assessment course. So our risk assessment course covers the way the HSE do it. It looks at the way NEBOSH does it and why that's important. So we've got the NEBOSH guidance there. We've got, if you go online, if you're going to do a NEBOSH, go online. Absolutely, your provider is going to tell you to follow this. But there's some really good things we can take away from this. Specifically, there's the 4 recognisable elements and how important they can come in. They come into it. Pre-risk assessment when you're doing your planning, and post when you're writing it up. So doing a risk assessment project, right, ultimately, the way we're talking about it in here, you've got the NEBOSH way, you've got the HSE way, and you've got sort of my amalgamated way of that. The interesting things with these, there are no risk assessment matrices. There's no matrices, no 5x5s, even 10x10s I've seen some people with. It's to the point and it's direct. So scope part one, I should say. I call it scope, context and the criteria. Why? Because I take that from the risk management process. I see this whole thing as a process, not just the risk assessment. If we look at the NEBOSH methodology, this helps us. This is really good. I do like this. So from online, we can see they want you to write up a description of your organisation at the end of the risk assessment, and they say it helps the markers to mark the paper, which I understand. Include the products, include the activities, and include shift patterns. Now, I do get that, but if we actually think about that ourselves in the planning phase before a risk assessment, we can follow people, equipment, people and processes, equipment, materials and substances of the environment, and that's going to help us plan. So this first part, even though NEBOSH are referencing writing it later on, think on a normal day. I'm out today. I'm going out today with onto site with the client in about an hour. Planning, scope, context and criteria. So in the guidance, sorry, in the illustration they give, we can see in there a number of words: body repairs, involved in accidents. So we would be thinking then, if we were planning that, involved in accident, does that mean we recover vehicles at 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe on our own, maybe on a motorway, maybe in the rain? Lots of questions that we would then need to ask members of the public. So we can see it's a good thing to when we're writing this up, but this is our planning tool as well. If we look at people, client, we haven't got to go far on our research. MOT centre fined £10,000 after boy crushed by car. So this boy was sitting, I don't know where he was sitting, but when we read through this, the accident happened when an MOT technician tried to move a car in reverse, but drove it forward. The HSE said the MOT centre had a designated viewing area to the side of the brake roller bay, which was a painted box on the floor. Well, that's just some warnings there straight away, isn't it? We've got to think about that, haven't we, before we go. People, equipment, materials, environment. Very important to do that walk around. What the NEBOSH guidance then gives, again, it mentions the methodology used. So we should be saying what and how the assessment was done. But yet again, if we're using this as a planning tool going forward, we can consider their guidance, of course, in real life. But if you think of it as a planning tool going forward, then ultimately we're going to be identifying what we need to look at, what guidance is out there, how you're going to do the risk assessment. And for me, if we look at mine, scope, context and criteria, I'm actually saying in mine, how I done mine, planning, let's have a look. I used an activity and industry-based hazard inspection checklist, which was developed in advance of the on-site risk assessment. This enabled me to follow a structured process. So I'm saying helpful prompts. I developed a document to help me with that. A hazard identification checklist, people and processes. So in advance. So again, whilst NEBOSH is saying the reasoning is so we can look to make sure, in the real world, when you're doing that planning, that's really important. So a hazard identification checklist really helps us with our planning, and we can think about that task analysis. Let's very quick one on that incident. Think about that young lad that's been hurt. Think about human failure types, action area, thinking area, non-compliance. I'm just going to fly through these very quick. And ultimately, when we think of that incident, an action area, a slip. So a slip, a familiar task that required little conscious attention. These skill-based errors occur if attention is diverted. So doing doing something you did not mean to do. That's really important. And also the HSE provide those typical control measures for that. So that planning, even though NEBOSH talk about it as if it's it being the write-up is done later, it's really important, isn't it? Hazard identification, risk assessment, determining controls, that hierarchy of control is going to be there throughout. The message and the reason why I'm doing these slides, I'm just going over my slides, I'm thinking about that planning. It's the planning that goes into it. That's really, really important. We've got to think outside of the box, but if we don't plan, then it's not going to help us. Okay, part 2, risk assessment, don't need to go through that. So, doing a risk assessment, quick look over the importance of identifying 4 areas. Those 4 areas that are in the NEBOSH style risk assessment and in real life are really important. What comes before the risk assessment, that's the planning to do the risk assessment, really important. When you're doing the risk assessment or when you're planning for it, you're already thinking about those. You're already thinking about those hierarchies of control. Are there legal hierarchies of control? Which there are with some regulations. So doing a risk assessment, nice and simple, no matrix, no need for a matrix. The HSE don't ask for one at the general level in work. You can see NEBOSH don't ask for one in their course. And do we use one? We do use them. Sometimes clients want them. But what I'm saying is you don't need to use them. It's about the planning. Planning, preparation, as we know, prevents the obvious performance.